A1.
By Shakespeare, again in quotation marks, we can signify William, son of John, born probably in 1564 in Stratford, where he died in 1616, a man who is variously referred to as an upstart crow, our Roscius, sweet Mr. Shakespeare, and who was known as a poet, a writer of more or less successful plays, and a very shrewd buyer of real estate. He is quite an interesting chap to talk about and to speculate about.
However, the fossil record is difficult to interpret. So when you see skull and the skull is so old and has got lots of cracks, you're really hard pressed to say this is human. And that's why the fossil record has lots of ambiguities. The interpretation of the fossil record is full of ambiguities, and these ambiguities gave rise to a number of hypotheses with regard to the origin of modern humans.
The force is at right angles to the velocity, which means that it doesn't change how fast I'm going, it changes the direction I'm going. So the ball doesn't get any slower, but the direction of its travel is continuously changing. It is accelerating because the direction changes. And that's very important, as we'll see later when we start thinking about spin and angular momentum. Now, what I want to do now is really start getting into the thick of spinning things. Now, I want to start talking about what happens as you change the geometry of spinning things. And for this, I'm going to need a volunteer who'd be willing to come up. You want to volunteer for me? Okay. Very good. I've got a willing volunteer. Now, I have here a spinning platform. See, so what I'm going to try and emulate is ice skater, ballet dancer type thing. And what you want to do is I want you to stand on there. Your name is?
Steve.
Steve. So you stand on there, Steve. Okay.
A2.
So I'm going to be talking to you about some of the evolutionary mechanisms that are responsible for generating the astonishing biological diversity of human populations. I'm going to be talking about them mostly from a biological perspective, but I will also make some reference to cultural evolution. In particular, I want to focus on three of these mechanisms: migration, adaptation, and culture. But I have to say that I'm going to focus mostly on migration.
A3.
Right. This is the outline of this talk. I'm going to spend a little bit of time giving you the science behind, so you won't escape. There is a bit of scientific talk. I'm going to give you a general background on this biological mechanism generating diversity, mutation, natural selection, and gene flow, migrations. And the rest of the talk is going to be about how these mechanisms have contributed to structure the biological diversity that we see today in human populations. So I'm going to be talking about the role of geography and migrations in human prehistory. I'm going to be talking a little bit about natural selection and adaptation to different environments, and the role of culture in all this process.
A4.
Okay, so let's start with this first part. I like using this picture because to me it represents the diversity of our human species. As you can see, we come in different sizes, in different shapes, in different colors. And why is that?
A5.
Well, certainly because over many, many years, we have had to adapt to different environments. So the challenges that our ancestors encountered in Africa are very different from an environmental perspective from the challenges that they might have found in Siberia. So the body has adapted in different ways to respond to these different challenges. But also the fact that after their origin in Africa, humans spread all over the world. And from that moment on, populations became isolated. And therefore, they evolved independently, finding different ways, different solutions to the different environments. So migrations, human dispersals, have played a role in generating this array of biological diversity. But also culture contributes to our differences. And the reason why I like this picture so much is because the differences you see between these different faces has not only to do with the way they look, but also with the way they dress. So culture also contributes, and particularly language, also contributes to this generating diversity.
A6.
I said gene flow also plays a role in generating diversity. And if you think, I have represented here two populations, population A and population B. These are two different populations. One could think individuals in these populations have different characteristics, look different. What happens if we allow gene flow, if we allow these two populations to intermix? They're going to, the frequency of certain traits are going to change. So we're not going to have populations that are either yellow or green only, but we're going to have at various frequencies individuals from the other population. But it could also happen that migrations or gene flow occurs in one direction. And this is what we geneticists call a genetic bottleneck. So we have this population, as you can see, is very polymorphic, has many, many different forms. And a subset of that population has migrated to a different area, to a different location, therefore carrying some of these forms into the new region. And therefore, the characteristics, the diversity in this new region is going to be affected, is going to be changed.
A7. Extract 1.
So I spoke about mutations because at the center of it all, there's the process of mutation. Mutation is what generates diversity.
Extract 2.
However, at about 10,000 years, the agricultural populations, communities that were developing or that were domesticating species were only in these pockets.
Extract 3.
And therefore they evolved independently, finding different ways, different solutions to the different environments. So migrations, human dispersals, have played a role in generating this array of biological diversity.
Extract 4.
But then the weather changes again, and at around 12,000 years, we enter into the Holocene. And the Holocene is the period, the epoch we're living in now.
Extract 5.
It is around this time that some species begin to dwindle, begin to be reduced in numbers.
Extract 6.
But we can also use indirect evidence, which is the distribution of genetic diversity today. And from that, we infer back, we look back and try to understand how this diversity might have been generated.
A8.
And therefore, the characteristics, the diversity in this new region is going to be affected, is going to be changed. However, it's not always possible to have this exchanging of genes between populations. And that is also going to affect the fate of the genetic diversity in the populations. So imagine that we have here two individuals, and they can mate freely, and the offspring of these two individuals is going to be neither dark, neither light. It's going to be something different because of the loss of inheritance. But what happens if we introduce a barrier? In this case, a bunch of hungry cats. If we introduce a barrier, those two individuals are no longer going to be able to freely mate. And they're going to have to mate with individuals from their own group. And this is called interbreeding. And the result of interbreeding is a reduction of genetic diversity. So basically, they're all going to look more or less the same, although there are always going to be some brave individuals that are going to be able to cross the barrier. So, but genetic barriers tend to reduce the diversity within populations. And in the case of humans, these barriers are not hungry cats, but are geographic barriers, for example, mountains or rivers, are climatic barriers or cultural barriers. If you think of the caste system in India, for example, it's a tremendous cultural barrier.